So every church I've ever been associated with, this one included, church I grew up in included, has had conversations about wanting to grow. Every church. Some of those conversations have been rooted in Jesus saying, "Go to the ends of the earth and make disciples." But most of those conversations have been a reaction to the fact that the church in the U.S. and Canada has been in a numerical decline since the 1960s. So for 5 decades, numerical attendance has been going down. And that is a truth that our church and any church has been reticent to acknowledge and work with. The truth that people don't just come to church now and have not been just coming to church. That's the truth, or one of the truths, of our existence today in the 21st century. And even with that truth, we are looking today at a model for church growth in this service. And when we talk about church growth, I have to go in and talk about the fact that even the churches we think are growing, even the churches that you hear about that have hundreds and hundreds or thousands of people coming to them every week, statistically, they're not really growing the church. They might have lots of folks at them, but they're not growing the church. Because what's happening there is people have left one congregation and have gone to another congregation where they can be anonymous, where the entertainment factor is high, or where they get to have the clout of being at a large congregation. Lots of different reasons to be there. But most of the folks who are there were at another church before that. It's not new people in the church. And when that happens, when people leave a church and go to another church, they don't always go to another church. When they leave, sometimes they don't go anywhere. They don't become affiliated with another congregation. Like, this is a truth that we know. Just think about the any number of folks who used to attend this church over the last 5 decades and who are still around. Some of them are at other churches and some of them are not. When people leave churches, that doesn't mean the net number stays the same. It usually means a loss in number. That's one of the contributing factors to that undeniable net decrease in church attendance and affiliation over the last several decades. And that may be disconcerting, but I take comfort in the fact that happened to Jesus too. We see that happening in our gospel lesson for today. John has a decent following of disciples. We sort of get this hinted at several times in the Gospels, that John has a sizable congregation, if you will. And the Gospels portray John as being happy when his disciples leave to go follow Jesus, but he also continues to have his own following. So that's a complicated thing to look into, and it's not for today. The Gospels even have him pointing out Jesus to his disciples, saying, "Hey, there's the Lamb of God." And when John recounts this happening, 2 of his disciples start following Jesus immediately. That's not a net growth of disciples. It's just John's disciples become Jesus' disciples. John loses 2, Jesus gains 2. The net number stays the same. We don't see an actual attempt to grow disciples, to grow the movement, until after this. When Andrew and Philip approach others about coming alongside Jesus. And what happens when they do that is the same thing that happens today. They make up their minds based on assumptions. Philip tells Nathanael that he has found the Messiah, the Christ, and that he is from Nazareth. The only thing that Nathanael knows about Jesus, other than Philip's claim, is that he is from Nazareth. And that one detail is the only thing he needs to know to judge who and what Jesus is. He's not interested in following Jesus because he's from Nazareth. And can anything from Nazareth be good? I actually like how the Common English Bible translates that, because it changes the way we think about it. And can anything from Nazareth be good? Like, it's left Nazareth, can it be good? That's not the whole town, the whole area, but can anything from Nazareth, like that whole area is just trash. That's what Nathanael is saying. And that's one way that people have not changed in 2,000 years. All we need to know to make up our minds is one detail. And oftentimes that detail leads to a lot of assumptions, some of them faulty. We think just because we know that someone is indigenous, or that they hate Trudeau, or that they think Rachel Notley was a really good premier, or anything, fill in the blank. That's all we need to know to judge someone and to judge them accurately. We do this all the time. The same thing happens when we're trying to do church growth and people find out that you're part of the church or I'm part of the church. When people find out I'm a pastor, that one detail, all the assumptions that come with it, changes so many things. That one detail is all the people need to know to judge us and our worthiness. If they're already part of the church, they assume that we're exactly like them or the church that they go to, when oftentimes we're not. Churches and congregations, even in the same denomination, are as different as siblings are, sometimes dramatically. If they're not part of the church, they make the assumption that we, or I, am just like whatever part of the church that they have left, or they've heard about and are not interested in being a part of, which is not the best thing when it comes to church growth, right? We know this. And just to put this into tangible situations, recently someone came to the church for weekend, and they were surprised to see the rainbow pages out in our lobby. And they asked me if we were an inclusive church, because their assumption was that we were not. That this is not a safe place for people of different genders and orientations. And we had a conversation for a few minutes, and I explained that I was proud to be serving in the Northern Province, which is wholly open and affirming and inclusive. And I had conversations about, I try to make sure that everyone who comes through those doors out there is safe and welcomed exactly as they are. And this person said, I'm not religious at all. I'm not interested in the church. I'm like, fine, that's you. That's okay. But they then said, but I know some folks who are, and they would need a place that was safe for them to be a part of a church. So maybe I'll pass on this location to those people I know and get to meet in my work. When I meet new people anywhere and in any setting, it doesn't matter. It's a little different in a church context. But if I'm out in public and people find out that I'm a pastor, there's always this really awkward moment. Sometimes it lasts for a long time. It's not just a quick moment, but a long moment, where they are really quickly trying to figure out, am I judging them really harshly for anything that they or someone else has said in the conversation up to this point? We were in New Zealand and talking to our tour group for a couple hours before they found out I was a pastor. And I could see all of their wheels spinning, oh no, what have I said? Is this going to be a crazy, miserable trip because this guy's a pastor? Because of something we it was tangible to me when that happened. They either do that, or they jump on the other end of the spectrum and they start using all this churchy language and religious language that had not been part of the conversation at all previous to this. So the conversation does a complete 180. I see some of y'all nodding. Y'all have experienced this too. It's weird. I'm standing in line to get food at Folk Fest. We're not talking church. We're talking music. Why are you talking church? I don't know. I am not your pastor. But because they find out, we're just talking, trying to pass the time because the line was slow. Oh, you're a pastor. Let's talk about, and I was well, how about that really nice band over there? Even for folks who are in the church, when they find out I'm a pastor, there's a stigma about that. most of the time. And it is true that I have a different relationship with you than with the general public. And there is stigma, and there probably should be some stigma around my position. I'm not really complaining about that, but it's just like the assumptions people make, they're tangible. They have tangible reactions. Everyone makes those assumptions. Everyone, based on that one piece of information. Everyone says, can anything from Nazareth be good? Sometimes they're faulty, sometimes they're based in good reason, sometimes they're okay, and other times they're harmful and demeaning. And this plays into church growth because if we're trying to grow the church, we're going to run into that. And again, we see this when Philip responds to Nathanael. When Nathanael asks, can anything from Nazareth be good? Today, we might hear that, can anything from the church be good? And to be honest, the church has had a lot of bad press over the last several decades. A lot of it, and for good reason, much of it. We absolutely must be okay when people have that assumption. That is the reality of 2021, or 2023. 2024, good gracious. The reality of being alive today is that people have that assumption and for good reason. And we need to be okay with people asking that question and having that starting point, because if we're not okay with that, we are simply denying reality, which is just a fancy way of saying we're lying. And I remember God saying an awful lot about not lying and being honest. And we demonstrate that we are okay with that, not by challenging it or confronting it, but by accepting it, by leaving space for it. Philip allows space for Nathanael to be himself and ask that question because for Nathanael, nothing from Nazareth can ever be good. But he opens the door in his response to something better when he says, simply come and see. It leaves room for that assumption, but come and see. It's a gentle invitation. That's all Philip says. He does not go into this long diatribe about how Nazareth is actually good. He doesn't do that. That's what I always do. That's my first instinct. He doesn't try to share conflicting data or viewpoints. I'm also guilty of that. I think most of us are. He doesn't try to argue or change Nathanael's mind at all. He simply says, come and see. This is an invitation to experience what Philip has already said has been good and hopeful for him. And we have to admit that there's already enough conflict in the world when people have different assumptions about ideas. Adding to that when they have an assumption about the church you think is false, or may not be true of our congregation, just like everybody else. But come and see is an invitation to experience something exactly as you are without asking you to change anything, without even implying that something needs to change. Come and see. Come and experience is a gentle invitation to give something a chance. And it doesn't shame people if they say no. That's also another important thing to notice. Come and see is an invitation to relationships with people. Come and see is an invitation to relationship and to the work that those people are doing in this world. And too often times, the assumption is it's an invitation to doctrine and dogma. You have to fit this box. That's not what Philip is saying at all. And the other thing we need to observe about this is that come and see is personal. It is direct. Philip is talking directly to Nathanael. This is word of mouth, and we all know that word of mouth is the most effective form of communication and advertisement and marketing ever. This is not a church sign. It's not a billboard. Those have their place. But come and see is a direct invitation to the person. It is word of mouth, and in our context, that's your word of mouth, not mine. It's my job to do this. When people hear me saying it, it's my job. The pastor has to do that. But when it comes from you, it means something entirely different. Come and see. That's the model for church growth. It's personal, it's direct, and it's an invitation for others to experience and be part of what is and what has been good for you, and what is hopeful for you, what is meaningful for you. That is the invitation. It avoids that confrontation and avoiding that confrontation in and of itself today is unique and intriguing. Because when else do we ever see people avoiding confrontation? Honestly. I can't remember the last time I actively saw someone avoid a confrontation publicly. That is unique. But it does beg the question, what are you inviting them to come and see? What has meaningful to you? You can answer that, and that's a good thing. Like, if you make it very personal, like, come and see, this has been good to me for these reasons. That's great. But in this time when people don't just come to church, what are you inviting them to see? To come and see. What are you inviting them to come and see here that isn't somewhere else? Every business that thrives can answer that question. Every organization that thrives can answer that question. What are we inviting them to come and see here? And this is why I'm proud of y'all, for those conversations we had a few months ago. Most churches don't do that. Most congregations can't answer why. Come and see what. And for us, that's a community of people striving together to grow with inclusive Christ-like love by developing close and healthy relationships. That happens in other places, but who is actually trying to do that intentionally? A community of people who strive to make the world better by partnering with Wings so that everyone who is there knows that they are loved, valued, cared for, and safe. That's a beautiful thing, and it's so very much needed in our world today. A community of people who care about our neighbors being able to afford and access healthy food, and we're willing to do something about it by opening our doors and supporting We Can. That's a concern so many people have. We're doing that. In these times when fewer and fewer folks are interested in participating in church, inviting them to come and see, to come and help and participate in those specific ways, it's probably one of the best ways we can grow the church. How we can grow the kingdom of heaven on earth, in this city, and in our congregation, and in this neighborhood. Come and see. That's the model for church growth. So remember, in your day-to-day life, when things come up, to gently remind and ask people and invite folks to come and see.